Hello everybody, this is Alchemist 2 and I'm back in with another book review. I just recently read The Monk of Mohka, which was written by Dave Eggers. And this is the story of Mokhtar Al-Kanhan, I'll get his name right here in a minute. Al-Kanshali. And this man was originally from Yemen. And I didn't know this originally, but the terrorism that occurs in Yemen is actually worse than what happens in Afghanistan. Yeah, it's pretty brutal, but nonetheless, the title itself, it comes from just a self-discovery of Mokhtar himself and just having the dissatisfaction of not being able to please his uncle and not living up to the expectation of his family. They're a very hardworking family, and he's very young at the time when they are in the Tenderloin district, and it's not a good place to live. This is absolutely horrendous. It's the poorest of the poor, and every day he lives between two porn stores, quite literally, hearing and seeing people go about lewd and lascivious acts and things that his child should never have to see. And at this point in time in his life, he doesn't really care about making something of himself or doing anything worthwhile. It's just, oh, I want to play Xbox. I mean, what teenager does it? And he's actually not a teenager at this time. But the reason his father or uncle came to the States is so Mokhtar would have a future, and his whole family, they're pushing that on him. And this is a land of opportunity, and of course we as Americans need to see that ourselves. But the book is really quite revolutionary and eye-opening, and I really didn't know an awful lot about Yemen myself. The only thing I had known was from the fantastic, beautiful, exceptional, heartwarming film called Salmon Fishing in the Yemen. If you haven't seen it, I would definitely recommend it. It's a very similar story, but it's less fraught with death-defying scenes and moments where you question if Mokhtar is going to get out alive and just the whole peril and every little thing that he encounters, you fear for him, and it's terrifying. But you learn also about coffee in and of itself and the origins of coffee. And the Boston Tea Party began all that. It was taken by the Dutch, but Romans were thought to really enjoy the Arabic version of coffee because it was considered the richest, the most savory, and the best. There were other types, like you have El Salvadoran, which I've got a friend whose sister harvests coffee. And you've got coffee just from all around the world, but the arabica is the best and the most flavorful. I wouldn't know because I'm not a coffee drinker. I prefer espresso, cappuccino, but I don't really do coffee. I'm more of a tea connoisseur. It's very intriguing, but Yemen, it's known, strangely enough, for just the grade of coffee that they have, and they have people called Qgraders, and Qgraders are the equivalent of a sommelier, and they have to go through school to be trained. And spoiler, Mokhtar actually goes to school to learn everything he possibly can, because when he realizes he wants to do this as fair trade and giving back to the community, and it's just such a beautiful idea. And he also wants to make people realize that there's more to Yemen than just what other people see. And it's all a comeback and underdog story in the most literal of all senses. And you root for him, especially when people in his own country think of him as a member of one of the hillbilly tribes that have taken over, and they're militant, and they're at odds with everybody else in the country, and nobody likes them just because of the way that they act toward other people, and he's judged as being a part of this group. They're prejudicial against him, and yet he speaks in such a way that makes other people believe that they have a double take, and then they change their tune. But it's really a splendiferously written book. It's beautiful. It's very harrowing in many aspects, and you learn quite a bit about coffee too, which I didn't know. And the Dutch, in and of themselves, and the trade routes, they claimed it as their own. It was the European coffee that everybody knows and loves. But the Boston Tea Party laid claim to that when America was celebrating its freedom. It was just a way of shoving it in the English, in the face of the English, in other words. Well, I knew that myself. I thought, where the coffee came from Holland, really? Huh, imagine that. The things you learn. I thought history is fascinating to me. You keep learning about it wherever you go, and even in books like this one, which is a memoir. And Mo himself, he didn't like to be called Mo, I'm sorry, Mokhtar himself, yeah, he thought that was very disrespectful. He's someone who called him that in the book was very racist, so excuse me, that was very bad alchemist, sorry. But Mokhtar, he's an example of persistence and determination and quiet resolve, and also just this calm demeanor and very rational way of solving a problem and going about it in a very logical way, in a way that's nonviolent, and telling a story. It's funny to see how he is able to get people to like him almost. I mean, I know if I ever met this guy, I would instantly like him, because he came from poverty, and he was able to create something absolutely phenomenal. And because of it, there are fair trade practices, and people in Yemen that are benefiting from everything that he had gone through, and still to this day is continuing to this day. Of course, there was a little bit of backlash because of Charlie Hebdo, but that was unfortunate. It's just sad that people think, oh, well, all the terrorists are from this particular country. That's not necessarily true. They're not all from Saudi Arabia or Iranian or Iraqian or even Yemeni. Somalian. I mean, they can be. What's interesting about terrorists can exist in any place at any time, and can be the most least suspecting people, and could be any number of factors that lead to them becoming that way. But I personally think that the media is glorifying such acts, and they shouldn't do that. They shouldn't even acknowledge that such person has done something so inhumane. But this story is a story that's redemption. It's not really about redemption. It's more about coming up from the ashes like the phoenix and making something of. He made something of himself. He did something not only for himself but for other people. He found his calling. He found his purpose. Not only that, but he found a passion that actually gave everybody's life meaning, including his own country. And I thought, whoa, that's ripple effect in action. And really, it's just a terrific story. And I had never read any of Eggers' books before, but Eggers writes in such a way that you really feel like you're living Mokhtar's story with him, and you feel such empathy and pity. Well, not really pity, but you feel empathy and sympathy toward him, and you want to slap some of the people that were making hasty judgments about him just based on the way he looked. And he wasn't that type. He was a person who had wit and intellect and a sense of humor, and oftentimes very self-deprecating humor, but he seems to be a lovely light in this world. And speaking with assertion behind his trials and tribulations, and just continuing no matter how hard the odds. And it gives me hope, it gives me inspiration to continue with my with my endeavor. My endeavor is still something that's in progress. I don't know if I'll be going back to school to get a master's of business administration, or if I'll be going down the road to art school or become a masseuse. All three options sound really good. Becoming an artist, it may not be the best because it's not really lucrative, but I'm waiting for a response. It's all about patience. That's something I've learned. It's something I should have learned earlier in life, but you're never too old to learn something new. You're always learning no matter how old you become. It's all about knowledge. Knowledge is power, as Einstein once said. I don't have much else to say about the Monk of Mohka. It was woefully short, actually. And there's even, I'm going to give the link at the very end because I feel that it should be mentioned and given its proper due, just because I feel it's my diligence to include that. Also, the district in the Tenderloin, I'm going to mention that as well, because I think that is also brilliant, and that helps the community, and it helps them rebirth themselves and become more than what they're known for. Let's see. It's the Mohka Foundation. It's www.THEMOKHA. It's spelled like the same way that it's spelled, because he didn't know how to spell Mohka. Foundation.com. And it helps the farmers directly in Yemen. I thought, yes, please give it back to the farmers. The farmers are the ones that deserve it. It's the same thing with our country. The farmers, unfortunately, they're not getting their due or their justice. And I don't care who hears this, and I don't really mind the repercussions, because truth is truth. The farmers deserve the pay. The other one is 826 Valencia. It's a tutoring center, and it's fronted by a retail shop, King Carl's Emporium. It sells sea exploration for humans and fish. It provides writing workshops and an array of other services. It's a welcoming place. And it's www.826. It's actually the numbers 8, 2, and 6, Valencia.org. So that's an org. And Mohka is a .com. So hopefully me getting that information out will give a little bit of an extra leg up for the Mohka Foundation and Valencia as well, because I think that they both deserve a little bit of a shout out. I like organizations like this that give back to the community and the people and those who are instrumental. We forget, and I know a lot of people know this, but for those of you who don't, middle-class people are the backbone of this country. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. Without us, you wouldn't have your rich or poor. We have to be there. There has to be a middle ground. I'm just saying that to get that off my chest, but I really enjoyed the book. I thought that the book was just exceptional. So until next time, live long, prosper. Ciao tutti.